Hello, I'm Michael Verney and welcome along to the Indo GAA podcast with thanks to AIB. AIB is at the heart of Gaelic games across both club and county, and in 2025 they're celebrating a decade of sponsoring the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. With this year's championship shaping up to be one of the most competitive in years, AIB is more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest. We're delighted to be joined by Spillane and Dick Clerkin to look back on what was a very mad and frantic football weekend. And Pat, we'll start with you. The Dubs haven't gone away.
Well, I suppose you'd have to start with Kerry, a magnificent performance. 10-5 victory over Roscommon.
We'll give them a little footnote later in the show, Pat.
We're still coming down after a high. You know, geez, you've had, I swear to God, I mean, you had the Munster final against Clare on a lovely hot day in Killarney. You had last Saturday a beautiful hot day in Killarney. And I swear to God, if you put the second half, if you put highlights of the second half, if you bottled highlights of the second half and the first half from last Saturday, you'd have the cure for insomnia. Oh, gee, it was yawn-inducing, lethargic, slow motion, lacking energy. Anyway, it was a great football, but at the same time, yeah, great championship weekend. The great thing about it is that, you know, what the British politician Harold Wilson once said, a week is a long time in politics. It's also a week or a weekend is a long time in the J world. And so this day last week, Cork were going to be dominating hurling for the next 100 years. They were so good.
According to themselves, Pat.
Right. And then the Dubs were finished. And look what's after happening. Cork are now in danger of being out of the All-Ireland Championship if they're beaten by Waterford on Sunday. And the Dubs are now one of the favourites for the All-Ireland. And on top of that, so big performance from the Dubs, as expected from Kerry. Really brilliant performance. Cavan beating Mayo, which was the major probably talking point of the weekend, along with Dublin's performance. Some great matches, and I watched Sligo and Leitrim. And bear in mind, Leitrim are a team who haven't won a competitive match in 12 months now. Great game, very enjoyable game. Sligo came from 7 points down to beat them. Really enjoyable game of football. So it was yet again another good weekend for championship football. Can't complain. But the Dubs, the Dubs are the big surprise. But you know, Michael, there'll be so many twists and turns. Like, we're taking a snapshot in time from last Saturday, and now suddenly the Dubs are one of the favourites for the All-Ireland. Yet, you know, I was looking at the stats. This was a Dublin team who could have qualified for the league title this year. The last game, they went up to Healy Park in Omagh. 14 of them that were involved last Saturday played in Omagh, and they were destroyed by Tyrone. Majority of these players were involved in a very subdued performance in beating Wicklow, and the vast majority were involved in that performance in going under to Meath. But, you know, like, and I'll just leave it at this for the time being before going into in-depth analysis. But, you know, like, the one thing you ask for a player is hunger and appetite and effort. And it's very simplistic, but I saw the hunger, the savage hunger and the commitment and the appetite of the Limerick hurlers, fighting for every ball, going for every 50-50 ball. And there's no drill, there's no coaching, there's no performance coach can bring that out in a player, only from within. And I saw the Dubs last week. I mean, they were on the end of some scathing reviews that they were finished, past their sell-by date, Cluxton should be retired, etc. But these are proud footballers. But by Jesus, the heart and the battle and the hunger they displayed last Saturday in Salthill, this was like a bunch of fellas who had never won an All-Ireland medal. It was really powerful performance.
Dick, isn't it a powerful thing, as Pat says there, when you have a point to prove and there's something innately inside of you where you're like, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that, we're finished. What we've won is irrelevant to people now. It's all about the here and now. Everyone's focusing on the Meath game. This is going to be a big transition for Dublin football. And all of a sudden, lads have a bit of a chip on their shoulder and a point to prove. And it looked at, and even look at Kieran Kilkenny the other night. Look at Cluxton the other night. Like, I thought the doubts about Cluxton and whether he was going to be replaced was absolute nonsense. Like, he could not have more credit in the bank. But they all had a point to prove. And by God, did they prove it.
Yeah, Mike. And I suppose we can say that now, because they went out and done it on Saturday night. But the reality was, going down the road to Salthill and Galway, those Dublin footballers had never been in this situation before. Like, that's completely unnatural when you think about it from an inter-county experience. Like, the last time they had lost a championship game that they then had to go out. And I'm ignoring, I'm sure they probably lost an odd dead rubber group stage game at some stage, but a big game that they had to bounce back was back in 2010, the Leinster final, and all those players are gone. Cluxton was the only one. So any games that those Dublin players have lost, it was at the end of the season to Kerry or a Mayo, and the only chance they got to bounce back was the following season when it was a new panel and a new objectives. So that was a completely new environment for them. A new environment and training, new discussions, looking each other in the eyes and sort of say, well, do we have this? Do we have it in ourselves to come down here and answer the critics, which they've never experienced before? And they did. And I sort of touched on that in my column last week, in that, you know, to do that, you have to have something in you when the rubber hits the road and the pressure is put on. Is there that drive to bounce back? And we've seen it in spades. Obviously, Kieran Kilkenny it's been well discussed across a number of platforms how good he was. But right across the board, there was sort of bit part Dublin players, if we're being fair to call them that, over the last half a dozen years, that have sort of dipped in and out and sort of got a few All-Ireland medals on the backs of the grace that went before them. That it was, the gun was literally put to their heads as, boys, you have to stand up here. You know, Paddy O'Coffey Byrne, there's no Brian Fenton now to carry you. He's gone. Don't be worrying about getting taken off. This jersey is yours. Do you want it or not? Because if you want it, you got to stand up and give us a big performance. And he did. You know, you can rely on Cluxton, and then you can imagine what you'd love to actually hear from some of the Dublin players what went on in Dublin training over the last 2 weeks, because I'd say it was a completely different environment than they've been used to. And I'd say now those players and Desi Farrell are looking ahead to the summer in a way that they never thought they would have been, in terms of hope, in terms of the now championship quality players. Now, their issue is the consistency of performance, and that has been the issue right throughout the year, that it's no good having one big day when you have all the psychological advantage, because it's not the hardest thing. And I look back to my own career, some of my best days were in the back of my worst performances. It drove something in me. Equally, some of my worst days were on the back of good performances, and we'll come to Galway in a minute. I do think Galway were off it a bit, maybe listening to their own hype, and especially around the middle, where they didn't get wiped out, but they certainly didn't dominate like they have in other games. And they met a team that probably played above themselves around that middle third as a group than they have had to date. And the result went rightly in Dublin's favour.
Just on Galway, Pat, is this the little kind of kick up the rear maybe that was needed? It wasn't like a chastening defeat or anything like that. They were only beaten by a score. The game was level, you know, deep into injury time. But is it a bit of a, okay, lads, we can't lose a run of ourselves here. We have to realise that we have to be on it still every day, because they weren't on it the other day. They were a little bit off, and they probably left the door slightly ajar for Dublin. Is it a night? And like, listen, it's fine saying that, I suppose too. They're in a horrible group where they're going to have to be on it the next day, and they're going to have to be on it the next day after that, or they're going to be in trouble. But is it a nice little wake up call for them, or how would you look at it from a Galway point of view?
Of course it is, but you know, like when we're doing analysis of games, you can only go by the matches you're seeing in the championship to date, right? League can be a bit haphazard because you don't know, are they playing full teams? Are they really serious or whatever like that? I mean, Kerry won a league and they didn't really put any effort into it. Only in the latter stages they suddenly produced some big performances. Bear in mind, the last big match that I saw Galway playing, let's say outside of the Connacht Championship, was when they were well beaten by Kerry in Salthill. You look at the Connacht Championship, right? So we've seen Galway in the Connacht Championship. We've seen them annihilate a very poor Roscommon team, and we saw them comfortably enough see off. Comfortably now, but like what I'm beginning to wonder now is, and I think there's no doubt about it, that the Connacht Championship, right? We're basing Galway's performance to date on their two Connacht Championship performances, but now you're looking at the subsequent performances of the Connacht teams outside of Connacht, and you're looking at Roscommon, that Roscommon team that came down to Killarney last week, and a pale shadow of former great Roscommon teams in recent years. They're a declining force. They were very poor. They were very poor against Galway. They were even worse against Kerry. And you look at Mayo, who were only a couple of points away from Galway. They're not a great Mayo team, and we saw last week they were absolutely humiliated by Cavan. So Galway's form guide is not as impressive as I think people have made it out to be. We based it on Connacht performances, and Connacht, I think the standards in Connacht of the top 3 provinces, Leinster, I think just below, and Ulster certainly below. Yes, you look at Galway, and we were raving about their middle third, those big men in the middle third that dominated everything. And what happened last week? Dublin blitzed them out of it. I mean, Dublin retained 70% of their kickouts. This is Stephen Cluxton, who had a meltdown against Meath. So that was number one. They were destroyed around the middle third, absolutely destroyed. Same problem again, this tendency to play Shane Walsh when he's most definitely not 100% fit. And he wasn't 100% fit last week, and he was poor. Yes, and at the same time, I thought the build-up play at times was poor. They got their 2 goals from Route 1 football. But, if you delve deep into it, you'll say, well, this is why I wouldn't rave. Like, Dublin were very impressive, and they're going to be contenders for the All-Ireland. Will they win the All-Ireland? I still have my doubts. I don't think there's an All-Ireland in this team. Maybe yes, maybe no. But we're only basing it on this one match. And this one match, you saw Dublin won, and deservedly won. Should have won by more. Look at Galway. They were only beaten by 1 point, scored in the last kick of the game by Tom Lahiff. Actually, but if you delve into their stats, particularly in the first half, like Galway left 4 2-point shots behind and 2 goal scoring chances. That's 2 goals and 8 points they left behind in the first half. But like, you can talk all you like about Dublin, but in a nutshell, everything that was great about Dublin in the past was in that last play to win. I mean, the kick out from Cluxton to Tom Lahiff, it was laser like 70 yards. The way they kept the game management, their composure, they stretched Galway from one side to the other. Tom Lahiff got the ball. 7 passes later, they found Tom Lahiff in the pocket again and over the bar. It was brilliant game management and composure. So a well-deserved victory for Dublin, but let's not write Galway's obituary yet, and let's not give the All-Ireland title to Dublin. There's a lot of water under it, but a good day at the office for Dublin last week. But bigger tests lie ahead.
I think when you're looking at a game, yeah, Pat's right. You have to be a bit careful of rewriting the form book. Like, the reality was Dublin had probably an extra week and a half to prepare for that game than Galway. So Dublin were out the week before. Galway had big, high-intensity Connacht final. I'm sure they allowed themselves to celebrate for maybe just a day, but even it takes 2 or 3 days to get the recovery right. So Galway had effectively 10 days to prepare for that game and come back down from a high and try to back up. That's challenging to do, whereas Dublin had just all eyes on that first round. They didn't know who they were going to play. They knew it was going to be a big game. They knew because of the group that they were in, it was going to be a big opponent. It was only after the event that they got Galway, and they were prepped for it. They were ready. So they had prepared really, really well for that. So Galway were slightly disadvantaged in the preparation stakes, and again, fine margins, like it came down to a kick of a ball. But Galway won't be as disadvantaged by comparison to the teams that are playing when it gets to the quarterfinals, semi-finals, which I surely expect them to be in.
Dick, just a quick one on Shane Walsh. Pat brought up Shane Walsh there. So he wasn't fit to be in the matchday squad for the Connacht final, and 2 weeks later he's playing in a big championship game and didn't look fully tuned.
Yeah.
I don't know. What sort of a message do you think that sends to a squad that got them over the line in a Connacht final, and all of a sudden, I know he's a brilliant player, don't get me wrong, I'm not questioning his ability or anything like that, but he's thrown back in and clearly not on it? Or is that like seeing the longer term picture, that he needs to have game time in for when they get to Croke Park, if and when they get to Croke Park? Is there any bit of, is it demoralising for other lads who played in the Connacht final when Walsh wasn't involved, that this guy is near, he comes in and he's fit enough and we're going to throw him back in? How does that work within a squad? Yeah,
it's a tough one for a manager, because as the year progresses, your players need to get reps in, they need to get match time, and it's a case of when's the right time. Is it starting the player like Shane Walsh and taking him off, or do you hold him back and bring him in for an impact? So, but you're really only going to do that in the last 15, 20 minutes. So you're making a decision, well, that's all that. You're not going to bring him in halfway through the first half. So we decided to start him, see where he's at, knowing that listen, this would be all observed in training. I'm sure he wasn't sort of hobbling around training. He would have felt that he could have had an impact. Now you have to qualify that with Davy Bourne stood up and done a job on him.
Yeah, big time.
Really, don't dismiss that.
Don't you love seeing a lad getting a lad's face?
Absolutely.
Well like
so he mightn't be that unfit. He might have just had a bad day and he was marked by a bloody good player that was just that 10% more tuned into him. So we'll not just write Shane off. He just had a bad day, but marked by a very good player that knew how to track him, and he was a good match for him. I do think that it might sort of shine a light on, well, what's Galway's best 15 in terms of how do they play their best? What is their best football? Is it because Shane Walsh does hold the ball up? He does slow the play, whether he's fit or unfit. He'll take the ball in. He'll stand up. He'll touch it on his toe. He'll move left, move right. If he can't beat his man, he'll recycle it. But that couple of seconds, that always allows a team to sort of get another 10, 15 metres up the pitch to set themselves up. So I think they'll have to figure out Porrick Joyce has to figure out how do we play well with a fit Shane Walsh, because I don't think he was unfit. I think he just was marked by a really good player and didn't have a good impact on the game. And that's going to be a concern for, well, it's not a concern, it's a first world problems, as they say, but that's something that Galway have to figure out, because their performance didn't improve with Shane Walsh on the pitch in the manner of which he plays. So that's something that they'll have to figure out. Yeah.
Pat, you had mentioned there, one of the biggest results of the weekend, anyway, definitely, was Cavan beating Mayo. And I remember it was after the Tyrone game, you kind of commented on Tyrone or Cavan having one of the biggest backroom teams and a big heap of coaches and no great discernible kind of tactics that we could actually see. This is a big result for Cavan, and I don't think probably Cavan are probably not getting enough maybe justice for it. We focus on Cavan here for a second. It is a huge result for Ray Galligan and Cavan, considering I even thought I was up in Healy Park that day. I didn't think they looked particularly fit the same day. I would have been the same as you. I didn't see any great patterns to their play. And maybe it is a representation on Mayo as well, but Cavan were brilliant at the weekend.
Yeah, but the same criticism you can throw at Cavan and having a bloated management team, and that match against Tyrone, not seeing any pattern to their play, not a game plan or tactics. You can say the same thing about Mayo, and it's something I hear an awful lot about Mayo. He has Kevin McStay, who I rated as one of the most astute judges of football on the Sunday game. He's a sharp cookie now. But he's assembled a huge management team. And from what I hear, he's very good at delegating. He allows them all a chance. One of the problems with having huge management teams and delegating is there is a lot of vices. There's a lot of possible mixed messages. And what's the old story about a camel was a horse designed by a committee? And there's an element of that when you assemble a huge management.
That's a new one now on me, Pat, now I have to say.
And there's an element of that. Now, I was reading what Raymond Galligan said. He said, we wanted to match them in terms of physicality, fitness, aggression. And if we could do that, we have a chance. And they did that. I spoke, and well deserved. I mean, the scoreline even flattered Mayo. I rang somebody from a friend of mine in Mayo during the week, yesterday actually, and he was making the point. He said, take nothing away from Cavan's performance, brilliant performance, everything right. But he was saying the focus always is on when the big gun gets beaten, you focus more on the big gun getting beaten rather than Cavan's deserved victory. And I'm afraid I'm falling into the same trap. But he was making the point that Mayo had brought no intensity to their play, no energy. And a Mayo team, Mayo at their best, playing that high tempo, that running wild abandon, running hard running, off the cuff, boom, boom, boom. He said there was nothing of that. There was no energy, no tempo from their play, no intensity. Secondly, he said their build-up play was absolutely too slow, too laboured. And I have looked at this all along. I've watched Mayo all the year, and I still look at the forward line. And that forward line, I don't see a plan, I don't see tactics, I don't see them playing to their strengths. And you look at the stats in the Galway game, and they weren't far away from Galway. The last 20 minutes of the Galway match, they got no point from play, right? You go to last weekend's game against Cavan and look at their scoring stats from their forwards, right? Right. Part the fact that Aidan O'Shea's goal came in injury time. But Of the starting 6 forwards that played against Cavan, of the starting 6 forwards, they got, and we're parking Aidan O'Shea's, 1 point from play. Darren McHale, 1 point from play. 10 forwards were used against Cavan. 4 forwards came on as sub. 10 forwards were used. They got 3 scores from play. Darren McHale, Aidan a point, Aidan O'Shea a goal, and Fergal Boland a point when he came on as a sub. I mean, holy God. 1 point from play from the starting forwards in 17 minutes until Aidan O'Shea got a goal. I mean, you can talk about reasons why they lost. That in a nutshell. You got to outscore the opposition. You've got to supply them with bullets. You've got to shoot. Because in actual fact, I was looking at Roscommon down, and they were a bit similar. Like, do you know this game of Gaelic football? And we talked about it, the evolution and all the innovation. But at the end of the day, over the years, the team who scored most in the opposition still won the game. It happened in the old rules. It happens now. I saw Roscommon down in Killarney, who came with a great plan and a brilliant master plan. We'll hold possession. So as long as we hold possession, well, Kerry can't have possession, so Kerry will. The only slight problem with Roscommon down in Killarney, they held possession, and sometimes some of their moves were very good. But they forgot about shooting a goal. They scored 6 points in the first half and kicked one wide. But they were afraid to shoot. And like, this goes back to Mayo again. I mean, if you can't outscore the opposition, well, you can't win. And like, with scoring stats like that against Cavan, holy God, that's abysmal.
Yeah, Dick, just on Mayo there, and listen, I'm the same as Pat. You do fall into the trap of analysing what is perceived as the bigger gun when they're beaten in a game like this. But like, small crowd in Castlebar, there's a lot of kind of apathy maybe going around the county. A lot of supporters not happy with how they're playing, the lack of energy. We'd say the lack of kind of discernible maybe tactics or styles of play as well. Are the wheels coming off a bit? This is McStay's 3rd year. They've been beaten in the first round of the qualifiers. Are the wheels coming off a bit?
Yeah, there's a bit of a staleness creeping in, and the like, really, yeah, they got to a league final, but they could have easily been in a relegation dogfight, just the way the results go. So that was an indicator that they really played above themselves in the Galway game when you compare the games either side of it, the Leitrim performance and Cavan. It's different things, you know. Going back to Cillian O'Connor stepping away. When you're always looking at a team, are they healthy, are they engaged, are they motivated, we markers can sort of tell you a lot, and there's wee markers around the Mayo side. Even Kevin McStay's manner and the way he's speaking after games over the league, he's quite despondent, quite tetchy, didn't embrace the rules early.
Definitely tetchy, Dick. Definitely,
yeah,
and he didn't like the fact that, remember, it had been put to him that the crowds weren't as big and this type of thing.
No, you're looking at any team that you feel are off. You're looking for signals that validates that. Looking back to the likes of Cillian O'Connor stepping away and not retiring. When I seen that early in the year, and I said that doesn't sound good. Kevin McStay's post-match interviews during the league, he always sounded very tetchy and, issues with the rules, as opposed to just getting on with them like everybody else, almost making excuses. And he almost cuts that figure after games that you just get the sense that things aren't in a good place in that Mayo camp. The crowds are down. You're talking to anybody involved in Mayo football or supporters, you definitely get a vibe that things aren't happy. There's issues with financial oversight. These rumours keep cropping up. You hear on WhatsApp groups and different message boards. So there's a concern there for Mayo football. And I think it probably that lingering effect of all the missed opportunities, the fact that they've left so many All-Irelands behind, and really that door is closing on them now, based on where they're at. And it's very, very hard to see whatever, but those players lifting themselves to get a result, to get them into the knockout stages, they just don't have the calibre of players to compete for an All-Ireland final. Like, there's been too many games, as Pat says, that their forwards are they're just not performing as forwards need to do at this top level. They need to be able to score, create an opportunity like at the end of the day, if your forwards don't know that it's their job to score, what are they doing out there? Like, they have to go, they have to commit, they have to get forward, they have to take responsibility for the shot. If they miss, they miss. No point in giving it back to a midfielder, half-back or corner-back. Just your job. You know, if you're the jersey from 10 to 15, your job is to score, and they're just not doing that. So worrying times for Mayo. You have to discount them as All-Ireland contenders. Yeah, you'll probably see them lift themselves for a big performance, but I fear that loss against Cavan is going to sort of leave them falling short now at this stage, the way the group looks.
Pat, just something you said, and might just segue into this for a second. You would have had very few voices in the Kerry camp, I'd imagine, when you were playing. What do you think is the optimum amount of kind of voices to have around a camp? There could be 15 to 20 voices in certain camps now. What do you think is an optimum? Is it one or two people? Or what do you think is an optimum, particularly in maybe, say, a modern county setup?
Well, the bottom line is, when a team wins the All-Ireland, and if they have 200 backroom staff, suddenly, Jesus, because in the herd mentality in the GAA world, if you discover that the crowd who won the All-Ireland had 200 backroom staff, well, next year, every county in Ireland from Leitrim up to whatever will have 200 backroom staff. So, look, when you win, everything is hunky-dory. Every county has 15, 20 backroom staff. Take the interviews for Jack. Jack has that down to fine art, and he still has been winning All-Ireland. So managers would take the interviews. I mean, Peter Keane was caught offside with some rare blue language last weekend after the Clare's horrible performance against Down. So optimum, there isn't, but there is. Like the problem is that at the end of the day, the manager is the manager. He's the man in control. And when you see too much control to other people, then you get mixed messaging. And that's where the camel is designed by the committee, because there's too many voices, too many messages. I mean, you look at Limerick, where it seems to be in Limerick hurling, who seem to have the perfect setup, who have John Kiley and Paul Kinnerk. And yes, there are other people in the background, but Paul Kiley and John Kiley as the manager, Paul Kinnerk as the coach, and the rest doing small. Like everyone said when Caroline Curran left, oh, that'll be the end of it. There won't be as much, but they're still there. They could win the All-Ireland this year. So look, one or two in charge. There's no doubt what I see in Kerry, and Kerry have a big backroom staff. But at the end of the day, it seems to be Jack, and to a lesser extent, Cian O'Neill are calling the shots. So, look, Desi is the same. Desi has one or two around him, and that's it. So there's no such thing as an optimum, whatever. But there is a danger with mixed messaging of delegating. I think delegating too much control, that's the failing of a lot of managers.
I think it has to be very obvious who the manager is at the end of the day. And that's what you're saying about kind of almost like ceding too much responsibility to others. The buck stops with the manager, and other people and part of the system will take little bits and pieces here and there, but the buck stops with the manager, and the manager, it's very obvious with the Limerick hurlers. John Kiley is the manager and everything goes through him, and Paul Kinnerk is the coach and kind of guru, and it's other people feed in. But I think in a lot of other setups, it's not necessarily 100% obvious who the main coach is.
That's exactly
4 or 5 coaches, and then you know what I mean. So, Dick, what would you have said even about that? Like just about the manager being the manager and it being obvious that the manager is the manager.
Yeah, it was funny last night. You know, just watching a bit of TV in bed here in the hotel, and what were they running a rerun of Mick O'Dwyer's Laker Yale, Pat, and like, you know, he was leading the team out on the field in Croke Park. He was blowing the whistle at train, and they were talking about his impassioned team talks. It was Mick. There was no, I don't even know, Pat, to be honest with you, who was ever Mickel's backup team. There was never any discussion about it. It was Mick. He was I'm sure there was, and really good people. Same in Mickey Hart. It was Brian Cody. It was John Kiley. It was Jim Cavan. Even though Jim Cavan in Dublin had as big a backroom team as any, there was no doubt who was the tip of all those respective swords. And there's nothing wrong with having a big backroom team, but it's about who sets the tone, who sets the standard, and who makes sure that all of those respective moving parts make sure that they're all aligned to the one common goal, and that they're not all trying to make a job for themselves or make themselves sound important to keep themselves busy in a paid job in many respects, that they all have to fall into place. And if not, they get moved on, which a lot of those good managers would have done. They're quite happy to change up their backroom team and move people along, and you probably would have found that over the years. But the vision, the culture, the set of guiding principles for that team and that group of players doesn't change, because that comes from the manager. And that's what you can see in most great teams.
Just quickly, Pat, you kind of touched on Kerry already. Did we learn much about Kerry? This was a bit of a dead duck early in the second half.
Kerry won by 10 points. They won playing in second gear. Positives to take out of it. What's different this year? Joe O'Connor has been a revelation at wing forward. Diarmuid O'Connor back to full fitness. They are the ideal prototype players for the modern game. Strong runners that can break the line. That's positive. Another big difference this year is goals. They're going for goals. 27 goals in their 10 league and championship games now, or 11 league and championship games. I mean, 3 goals last weekend. It's the mindset that was in the player's mind when they were going for the goal. Like David Clifford, the easy option would have been taking a point, but when he got, even though there was 3 or 4 defenders, he went for goal. Sean O'Shea got the ball, punch over point, but no, Shawnee was looking for a goal, laid it off to Paul Ganey, goal. Paul Ganey cutting through on the left-hand side, easy option, punch point. No, looked across the goal, lobbed it across, Gavin White put in. So scoring goals, Diarmuid O'Connor, David Clifford, subdued, 10 possessions, ended up with 1-3. Their shooting efficiency, okay, you can only beat who's in front of you, 78%. So a good day at the office. And then you start to say, like, there's a lot of things that worry me about when someone said, that's great, they'll have no hard games until they get to the quarterfinal and they'll be fresh and ready. I'm not too sure. Last year, they had no hard game in the qualifiers and they weren't ready against Derry. They struggled against Derry in the struggled and were beaten by Armagh. And I'm worried about this now. Okay, the Cork match will be huge in 2 weeks' time. But at the moment, like the easy game they got against Clare, the easy game they got against Roscommon, I don't think that's going to count for any good. It was two things about it. One interesting stat, like even though they won so easy, they were winning by 5 points at half time. In the first half, only one carry forward in the first half scored from play. That was Joe O'Connor. And it was the 47 minutes when the second forward scored from play. That was David Clifford. This is in a game where they were strolling. But the one thing that I will see, I got worried a bit at times. A lot of their build-up play in attack was back to bad habits. It was very lateral. It was very slow. And you were starting to say, why was that? Because they were a much superior team. And of course, the obvious answer is the key link player was missing, Paddy Clifford. I cannot overstress enough how important Paddy Clifford is to this Kerry game plan, and especially this Kerry team under the new rules, because Paddy Clifford is a heads-up player, beautiful kick passer, and the ball is moved quickly into attack. The boys are showing for it. Last week, it didn't happen. So, they'll have learnings from it, yes, but it was when the highlights reel is being produced at the end of the year, this won't get a millisecond. It was forgettable fare.
Pat, I didn't think it'd fall into the whole learnings category. I didn't think this kind of rugby parlance talk almost.
I'm listening to Leinster rugby boys talk too. Learnings, yes, yeah. learnings.
Back in your day, Pat, it was just lessons. That's what it was called. Did you do your lessons? You know what I mean? There was no learnings.
Yeah, but it's very hard because when you're playing, and Dick will agree with it, I'm sure. Like when you're playing a team which is much inferior than you, and Roscommon weren't in the same ballpark as Kerry, you do fall into bad habits. They start to drag you down to their level a bit at times, and I felt Roscommon did drag down. Kerry were sloppy at times. They got turned over, particularly in the final third. They were poor, and they were the same against Clare. And that's coming from playing a game. You know you're going to win. There's no danger you're going to lose, and bad habits creep in. And that's the danger, that these bad habits creep in, and you don't take learnings from it. And suddenly you're facing Donegal, or you're facing Armagh in a quarter final, and that bad habit is punished.